Dear Saskia and Mariana, I'd like to welcome you on board.
Hello, thanks for having us.
Hi, welcome.
Hi, it's an honor to be here.
Great. At this time, I've got two beautiful, smart women with me to have a dialogue about creative learning and community involvement. Saskia is joining from San Francisco, USA, and Mariana from Denmark. Ladies, welcome on board. We're lucky that Saskia hasn't yet fallen asleep. Thank you, Saskia, for saving your time. Please accept our special thanks on behalf of the entire TEGO community for being with us here today.
Thank you so much for having us.
So I don't want to waste any more time and start right away. Mariana, you were part of the Lifelong Kindergarten Research Group, where Scratch was created in MIT. And Saskia, you were part of the Scratch team. And Scratch has been one of the ground-shaking, probably the most influential creative learning platform in this era. Could you just tell us about the philosophy behind Scratch? In your view, what has been the most remarkable outcome of Scratch today?
Sure.
You can start and you can take turns as you wish.
Great. I can go ahead and start. I love talking about the philosophy of Scratch. It was something that I was really excited to learn about and the thing that drew me in. So Scratch is built on the idea of constructionism, that children and really everybody learns best when they have when they're able to create projects about things that they care about. And with Scratch, something that's very important is to get to a place where students are creators, not just consumers of the technologies around them. But the thing that I think makes Scratch really special is it's not just about code. So Scratch, when the team talks about what they do, they don't say, you know, we're a coding platform. They say that we're an online community where students can create projects about the things that they care about. And they happen to be doing that with code. So the focus is really on self-expression and creativity rather than, you know, all hands on deck learning to code. But in that process, they're learning code as a tool in their toolkit that they can use in many different settings. And then the best thing about Scratch that I love is that it has such a rich community connected to it. So it's not just about creating projects, but it's about connecting with other students, sharing your work, and really feeling like you're part of something bigger.
And then,
yeah,
go ahead.
Sorry, it's really important to highlight that Scratch is not a game. It's a platform that joins different communities, right? It's a platform rather than a game.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think it's a good hook for the other part of the question, which is the most remarkable outcome of Scratch. And as Saskia was saying, definitely the community is the most remarkable part of it, because if you think about it, there are so many other tools that support children in learning how to code. But since that's not the main goal of Scratch, like the main goal is the community building part. And then as mentioned before, like the coding part is just like one way of expressing yourself on your projects and on the things that you're passionate about. So there's a quote of one Scratcher that it was that the person came for the projects but stayed for the community. And I think it tells a lot how the people that really believe in Scratch, how this community is being built on.
Thank you so much. It was really great to highlight these facts about Scratch, because I know that you guys have put forth a lot of effort to explain it to its users well. Actually, the users experience it, but people who don't know Scratch, I think they should understand what it is and what the philosophy behind Scratch was, because it's kind of summarizing the recent change in learning culture. Thank you so much. And based on your experience so far, how would you describe meaningful and creative learning experience? And of course, you may prefer to address it differently for different age groups.
Yeah, I can start with that question. So the meaningful creative learning experience really comes from, I think the best way to actually explain it is mentioning the 4 Ps of creative learning created by Mitch Resnick. That is also the leading professor in the lifelong kindergarten group. And basically the 4 Ps is the projects, passion, peers, and play. So the projects part is that people learn best when they are making projects and that are passionate about. So that's what the passion one stands for. And then the peers is the part that we were talking about, community, the part of sharing your project is not only something that you do for yourself. I mean, of course, like you can do something that you're very passionate about for yourself, but the sharing part is really important for other people to be inspired by what you do, to even like give you constructive feedback. And then there's the play part, which sometimes can be a bit misunderstood because it's not only a matter of fun. It is also having fun and feeling joyful, but I think it's a very essential component because play allows and builds the safe environments for people to make mistakes, to take bold ideas and risky action sometimes. So that's why I think like the 4 Ps is a great way to describe what we mean by meaningful creative learning experiences. And in the part of like addressing the different age groups, the core part of the 4 Ps, we believe that they apply for the majority of the age groups, if not all of them. But obviously the way or the interest that people will have, like obviously that would change in different age groups, but then also will change like individually. And I think the older you get, also the peer interaction might change, might probably need to be less facilitated that for the very, very young ones. So, and the older you get, probably the play aspect might even need to be highlighted because for younger children may be just a bit easier to get into that playful spirit than for older kids.
Just want to pause you here for a moment to show Resnick's book that we're going to give away to all of our participants today. I'm sure you have it too, like everybody has it, like a bedside book. Arkadaşlar, may I kindly interrupt our interpreter as well to speak a little bit of Turkish here. Arkadaşlar bu kitabı şu an tam da Mariana'nın bahsetmiş olduğu bu kitabı, Yaşam Boyu Anaokulu kitabını bugünkü bütün katılımcılarımıza forum çantamızın içinde hediye edeceğiz. Çünkü bu bir başucu kitabı. Yeni çağdaki öğrenme kültürünü çok güzel tarif ediyor. Hemen arkasından okuyorum. Öncelikle 4P diyor Resnick. Bunlar projeler, tutku, akranlar ve oyun yoluyla yaratıcılığı geliştirme. Ve arkasında şu yazıyor, Palo Alto Araştırma Merkezi Direktörü şöyle demiş, bu beklediğim kitap, Yaşam Boyu Anaokulu, hayal gücümüzü harekete geçiren, tetikleyici ve incelikli örnekler üzerinden hayat bulan, 21. yüzyılda öğrenmenin nasıl olması gerektiğine dair düşüncelerle, cevherlerle dolu, bu sizinle birlikte olacak. I'm sorry to interrupt about this, but Saskia, please go ahead.
Oh yeah, that's the best way to to plug in the next thing I was going to say, which is thinking more about the ages and you know, this book is called Lifelong Kindergarten. That's the same name as the group that both Mariana and I were part of in different ways. And I love that name in itself, the idea of lifelong kindergarten, that any learning experience at any age can have those values of kindergarten, which is just such an incredible part of Mitch's book. So in thinking about what kind of learning experiences work for all ages, I think it's really a great thing to think about. Even older students, even us as educators, can still feel the joys of kindergarten, of trying things that are new, of being messy and joyful and silly and playful, and have that be part of any experience, no matter the age.
Yes, that the spirit of risk-taking and autonomy, I think these are the much missed aspects of learning. that have been dulled for a long time. And it's good that we're discussing these things all together through Witch's book and the Lifelong Kindergarten Research Group. Okay, now I want to touch base on the family projects that you've done so far. Could you tell us about the family projects in which you took part? I'm asking this question in particular because in Turkey, parents are not considered to be the key partner in education practices or the education system. Is it the same case in places where you live, work, or do research? And can you tell us about those community projects that you've done?
For sure, I can go first. We love talking about family creative learning. This is one of the things that Mariana and I can talk about forever. So it's a pleasure to be able to mention this project here. So family creative learning, which is the project that both of us worked on in different times, is a project of Dr. Rickarose Uroke of CU Boulder, where she runs the Creative Communities group. And very practically, family creative learning is a series of workshops for families to engage in making and creators and see themselves as designers and inventors. So for parents and children to learn together through the use of creative technologies. And the workshops take place after school, usually in community centers. Depending on the workshop, it's usually once a week for 5 weeks. And I think the most important thing is that all of the workshops are divided into 4 parts: eat, meet, make, and share. So all of the workshops start with a meal where families come together and they get to, not have to worry about dinner and experience something that we all experience every day of sharing a meal. And then they move on to meet, where they actually go into different groups, where parents go into one room and students go into another room. And this is a really wonderful opportunity for parents to not just learn about new technologies, but to really get to know each other and maybe share some fears that they're feeling about technology, and really create that community together. And then they come together and they make projects. And usually these projects are with Scratch and Makey Makey, and for younger audiences using Scratch Junior. So families start with a prompt, like create a project about a carnival. And over the course of the 5 weeks, they create a project together. And then we always end with sharing. So sharing where you're at, sharing how the project went. And the whole workshop ends with a family community showcase where community members come and see the projects that families got to make together. So we design the workshops to build on families' relationships and cultural backgrounds, and also to strengthen their social support and expertise around computing.
Are these like monocultural groups or multicultural groups? Like, how do you organize it?
That's a really great question. A lot of the groups are coming from historically marginalized communities. And so in the workshops that I was involved in, there were all kinds of different families that were coming in, many that were not native English speakers, some that were Spanish speakers, some that spoke different languages. And so there sometimes students were interpreting for parents. And I'll let Mariana talk about her experience too.
Okay, thank you, Saskia.
Yeah, so the families that I worked with, all of them were not native English speakers. The majority of them were families that came from Mexico, or they were first generation in the U.S. And I think that's interesting what Saskia said about their children being more or less facilitators in this like language exchange, because I think it's also a good hook to emphasize or just maybe not emphasize, but just to discuss the parents as key partners in learning, because sometimes we think that parents or their children are going to have like very specific roles in the workshops or in learning in general. And I think that's one of the most interesting, or at least like one of the most interesting parts of family creative learning, that you learn, we as facilitators, we also learn how parents can have so many different roles. And then there is one sentence that was actually the title of one of the papers of Rickarose that is called "I'm Not Just a Mom." And I think that's a very strong saying, because it's basically this mom saying that she's also a learner and she's also a facilitator in their family learning, and not just restricted to the role of being a mom. So there is also the part of the parents also being involved in knowing a little bit more the technology that their children are using. So in that sense, if they see that spark in their children's interests, they can also support better. They can also see themselves as learners and just empathize with their children more as well.
I think.
Sorry, go ahead, Saskia.
I was just going to mention that I think it's common, you know, in the States here too, for parents to sometimes get pushed aside or thought of as an afterthought in education. Not everywhere, but when I taught at a school, it was really challenging to engage parents, and there's so many different things for them to balance. So I think that's maybe something that's common across education systems. But of course, parents are students' first teachers and ongoing teachers, and something that's so important for them to be, you know, not just involved in their students' learning, but to, like Mariana said, to see themselves as learners too, and to think about the different roles that they can play as they explore these new technologies and explore what their students are learning or what their children are learning.
Thank you. I was going to give such a summary that the bottom line is technology and creative learning is not only for elites, is not only for students. So I think it's an essence in the new culture that we need to build together collaboratively. So thank you for all for sharing all your expertise and knowledge in the area. So you've already mentioned some positive outcomes, but if we ever try to carry out a project as such, what are the setbacks and limits, and what should we pay attention to as we, try to set up a project like that?
I think I would emphasize just like the positive outcomes, just because like normally when people go like, oh yeah, I really want to do things with creative learning and technology and families, and then when they see the structure that Recurrence created, which is eat, meet, make, and share, normally they tend to like, let's just focus on the make part, which I think for us is just kind of like not the least important, but at least it's like the most common, and because I think it's so nice and just so refreshing to have like the eat and the meet. Not only refreshing, but they're just essential. Like the eat and food as a way to connect to people. So we have dinner with the families, we facilitators, researchers, professors, like we have dinner together. And that's how we start the workshops. And then the meet part, normally in family-friendly workshops, people don't see as important to separate the children and their parents, because it's really important for the parents, as Saskia mentioned, for them to have this safe space where they can talk about their insecurities about technology and how they are relating to that. And the share part is the part that connects also not only with the families, but with the community. So I just wanted to address that as positive outcomes. And then if someone also wants to do similar things, like those parts are really important.
We've heard in feedback a few times that the meet part of the workshops feels a little bit like therapy, because families are, you know, there's so much going on as a parent that you have to be aware of, and to just connect with other parents and hear like, wow, I'm scared of that too, or this makes me nervous, or I didn't know that other people felt that way too. It's just such a important connection to make around, especially the themes of technology, because technology can be scary, and that's okay. But I think that's, you know, one of the challenges, I guess, to reframe that as a challenge. It's these kinds of interactions often get pushed to the side in workshops. So I'd really encourage folks who are thinking of creating similar workshops to really make space for eating and community and meeting. It's, I think, at the heart of what family creative learning is.
I agree. With language learning and technology involvement, I think we need to lower the emotional filters. of all the participants. And I think you found out a very nice framework for it. Like eat and meet would definitely lower that filter. So we will definitely borrow it. Thank you.
Definitely. There's a great guide too on the site.
Okay, great. We would be happy to have it too. We will definitely share it with our participants. One general question before I ask you about your current positions as a researcher and your work at Fix. So how can educators support themselves and families in the community during this rapid period of change? I know creating meaningful creative learning environment is one. Are there any other recommendations for educators?
You want to start, Saskia?
Sure. Yeah, that's such a great question. It's such a big question too. There's so many things to focus on. Whenever you talk to either of us, the themes are always going to circle back to building relationships and really, taking time to get to know students, to understand if you're feeling overwhelmed, to really turn back to your community, because these are going to be the things that sustain us, especially when things are tricky or challenging, or, this past year has been a challenge in so many different ways. So I think always making space and room for relationships, which doesn't get talked about that often in conversations about technology, but is so important.
And I would add to that, for educators also, like, it's just sometimes we might feel that it's such a weight or just so much pressure because, like we have to keep up with the current changes. And then there's all like the support of families and students. And I think I was just gonna say, well, also connected to the lowering the emotional barriers, it's also about us supporting ourselves first, because we cannot support others if you're not supporting ourselves first. So how are we gonna encourage students to be more creative and to take more risks if we don't feel like safe enough to take those risks or just to be more creative? So there's also like that relationship that Saskia is saying with each other in our community and also with ourselves. And obviously we can do things to support our community in order for us to be easier for us to support ourselves.
And I think
great advice. Thank you. Go ahead, Saskia, please.
Of course, I'll make this quick. Another thing I think is of course, creativity, which is something that we care about a lot, and not just learning technology for technology's sake, but learning it to express yourself and the things you care about, for thinking about how you can make an impact and ultimately what kind of futures you can invent. And that's so important to nurture that kind of creative thinking early on.
Great, thank you. So turning to Saskia, can you tell us about Vix and your job at Vix? You seem to have a unique position. Like, what are your goals? What are you trying to achieve there? Can you tell us a little bit about Vix and your position?
Yeah, of course. I have a unique position because I like to do too many things. So I work on at Wix.com, which is a website builder that's mostly used in professional environments. But I work on an education team called Wix Education, actually with another alum from the Lifelong Kindergarten group. So we're always talking about constructionism and creative learning. And our goals are very similar to the goals of Scratch, which is creating a platform where technology can be seen as a tool in your toolkit to make and invent the worlds that you want to live in. And with websites especially, these are mediums for communication, for expression, for getting really creative with, design and the messages that you want to send. So we are creating curriculum for educators to use in their classrooms for free, as well as a platform for educators to connect with students as they're making websites, and whether it's a portfolio site or a website that's a fan site for something they care about, or showcasing their projects. And then we're also working on very new, a little bit of coding too. So it's not just about dragging and dropping into the editor, but coding that as well. And one of the other things that I do, my technical role is called the Education Programs Lead, but I also help build communities. So thinking about how to support educators and the different ecosystems that work with students in seeing themselves as creators and inventors with technology as well. So our tools are pretty new. They're not available outside of the US yet, but really excited to extend them. And I'd love to share them when we can bring them to Turkey.
Thank you so much. We're looking forward to it indeed. I wanted to learn about your position, particularly to highlight that, like, we all talk about the fact from now on, new jobs will emerge every day. And in fact, educators can create their own jobs. And I think you are one of them, and you're leading and you are actually doing something that's really useful for a technology company, right? And what can you say about that shift from the educator's role to take more part in the technology business?
That's a really good question. I'm still figuring that out.
Yeah. Surprise question.
I started my career as a classroom teacher, and then made my way to the Scratch Foundation, and then made my way to Wix. So I've been in a bunch of different kinds of industries, but I really am grateful for the time that I spent connecting with students in the classroom, and feel like one of the things that hopefully I can do is bring that experience to technology. I live in San Francisco, which is, the heart of technology in the States. So I'm seeing a lot of technologies be made by people that aren't connecting with the people that they're creating the technologies for, or made by people who are not part of those communities. Not saying that I'm part of all the communities that I'm creating for, but I think that's a really special connection to have, and really exciting, I think, to be able to take the strengths of teaching and learning environment design. And I always feel like I'm learning something new at this company, because I get to talk to designers and product managers and marketers, and it's just really expanding my view of how things get made and what's possible.
I bet so. And this is what I wanted to mention to all of our participants. Most of them are young educators, and they should really delve into the area of technology and discover it for themselves first, and then make sure that they have some part of it. They should get involved in the projects, ed tech projects. Otherwise, it's going to be, like you said, done by hands that are not very much part of that community and that culture, learning culture. So I think this is something very important for developing countries as well. We've got technical people that they are doing their job really well, but at the same time, we need to make that bridge between educators and the technical people, and educators should take the lead to really get into their projects. This is why I wanted to mention this, and thank you very much for supporting it. Mariana, can you tell us about your research at the Center for Computational Thinking and Design? And what's your research about, and what do you think should be the next key area of research? Just to give a hint on those, who want to carry out research in this area.
Yeah, so the Center for Computational Thinking and Design is interdisciplinary research center here in Aarhus University. And it's an interdisciplinary between computer science, information studies, and a little bit of the Department of Management and Business. Yeah, I think that's the correct name, this translation in English. And the research that I'm doing now, so I'm a PhD student, and my current research, I'm part of a big project, and we're trying to answer the question of how to teach students about emerging technologies and its societal implications. So, and by emerging technologies, I mean AI, machine learning, Internet of Things, augmented reality, more or less like those technologies that we are working with currently. And And then it's really related to what you said about like the next question, like the next area of research, which is also, it's kind of like what we're doing now, but also how we are aiming to bridge it. It's basically focusing on the societal implications, because there are so many initiatives and curricula about how to teach children about machine learning, but less about their societal implications or how this technology affects us in our society. And because sometimes machine learning, well, it can also be very fun and you can use it to express yourself, but the relevant part of like how it is so ubiquitous and how it's so embedded, especially on students' lives, in the format of social media algorithms or facial recognition. And then they are interacting with it without really having a critical approach on that technology. And it is important for them to know, and also for us to know, that this technologies, as Saskia said, they were developed by people, right? So there are embedded decisions that were made when designing those technologies that it's also important for everybody to know as citizens. So what we're trying to say is that it's not that everybody needs to know how to design a machine learning algorithm. That's definitely not what we want, but more about being almost like conversationalists in this technology world, that you're able to have opinions and have decisions based on how things work, but it's more about having a critical eye on that. So that's more or less how my research is going, and that's also how I believe we should push this field forward. As you said, Devin, combining the tech part, but also like the humanistic approach, the creative approach, and making sure that technology doesn't live in a bubble. Like, it's all about how it interacts with us.
Thank you so much. That's so well said. And good luck with your further research. And I'm hoping that more and more educators will take part in research in the future. And I've got one question that I would like to pose at both of you. I think this is about family projects. I then posed the question, what kind of Scratch projects did you select for the participants so far? Can you give specific examples how you care about the differences of families? So I think there are 3 questions. Do you consider the technological skills of parents while choosing the Scratch projects?
Yeah, so normally how we prompt the project to the families, they normally are very related to something that is important to them. So like, I think Saskia can tell about like also the older or the past versions of family creative learning, but I can also give some examples of the recent ones that we ask families to think about their favorite family moment or a trip that they did together, and then they could do that project on Scratch. So, and then tied to the 3rd question about like how we take in consideration. So basically we do a run, like the first workshop is basically telling the parents the basic functions of Scratch, so they can have the tools to actually do the workshops, but we are all there as facilitators to support them. And just as they go, as they face a challenge, we're there to give some suggestions or advice. I don't know if Saskia wants to add more things to that.
I think that was wonderful. I think the only thing that I'd add is that, and we addressed this a little bit, but something that emerges is that, you know, not every parent is going to leave the workshop feeling like I'm going to go code everything in Scratch now. Some parents leave seeing themselves as connectors, so helping their students connect and find new things, or cheerleaders leading their students on. So there's other ways to support and engage students that aren't just being really embedded with the technology, even though that's really great if that happens. And this is part of the paper that Mariana was referring to, that goes through these different roles that parents can take on as they go through these workshops.
Thank you so much. I think that was clear enough. And if you happen to share with us any kind of guidelines or framework, we would definitely publish it on our blog, and our participants could get hold of it. And ladies, I could chat with you forever, but I think our time is up for this chat. And can I have your final remarks before we close?
Oh, so much pressure. I think, first of all, it was such a pleasure to be here, and an honor to be with you all today. Thank you so much. It's almost 1 a.m. here, so I'm just feeling so excited, but probably going to go to sleep next. But I think that I would just, if you were a new educator or getting used to these technologies, I think one thing that maybe we didn't address is that it's okay to feel uncomfortable, and just imagining yourself as one of your students as you're trying things out and testing things, and feeling what that uncomfortableness and vulnerability feels like is really useful. So even if you're new to this field or getting used to technologies, new technologies, I encourage you to keep going and to know that it's okay if it doesn't work out the right way, and to use that as an opportunity to connect with your students further.
Thank you. And Mariana?
Ooh, after that, I don't know what to say. I think I totally agree with Saskia said. And just building on top of that is, you know, sometimes it's so easy to get overwhelmed by this constantly changing technology. So another like tip of advice that I would give is also not to get caught on the trying to know, like, I need to know teachable machine, I need to know like this other technology, because they are going to change as any other like coding language, for example, right? So I think if you're interested in technology, which also like you don't have to be, you don't have to feel that pressure, but if you are, I think just like a broader approach and really trying to understand this relationship and how it is affecting like children's lives and our lives, that for me seems to be a more sustainable approach.
Thank you so much. That's also very important to warn both families and educators about the distractions of technology, and feeling like having the low self-esteem because of the re-emerging technologies each day. But I think attending forums like this and following blogs of some really good educators, I think these are very helpful ways to stay focused and not waste a lot of time on little changes and different products, I think. What do you say?
I think one of the beautiful things that came out of this past year is that we can do things like this, that we can connect across time zones and across space and learn from other people. Like there are these really rich communities that are emerging on sites like Twitter with people sharing their work. So I think finding online communities and learning from others is the most important thing that you can do, and to continue attending things like this and connect with other people.
Yeah,
so I think this is really wonderful.
You know, we are delighted to have you. I think this would have a very good effect on all our participants' viewpoints, because really we need to talk about family and community in Turkey more and more. And I think this was a nice way of highlighting that fact. Thank you so much. Looking forward to collaborating with you in the future, in the near future. And like you said, the world has globalized even more, and we have like such a great opportunity to meet up whenever we want. So thank you very much once again on behalf of the entire TEGEV community.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us. This is such a pleasure.
Yeah. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.